Hello friends, please like and subscribe to the channel and enjoy the stories. Chapter 1. The Train That Never Stops. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September when Ava boarded the train from Berlin to Prague. Her battered leather suitcase, more charm than utility, clattered into the overhead rack as she settled by the window. Outside, the sun hung low, casting golden streaks across the platform. Ava loved traveling alone. It made her feel untethered, like she could shed her skin and become someone else entirely. This train, known locally as the Eterna Express, was peculiar. It wasn't on any official schedule, yet every traveler in Berlin seemed to know its story. It was said the train only appeared to those who needed it, bound for a journey they hadn't planned. Ava dismissed the legend as romantic nonsense, until today. Opposite her sat a young man, perhaps a year or two older, deeply engrossed in a leather-bound book. His features were sharp, almost otherworldly, but his expression was soft. When he glanced up, his hazel eyes locked onto hers for just a moment, warm and curious. "First time on the Eterna?" he asked, his voice tinged with an accent she couldn't quite place. "Is it that obvious?" Ava replied, trying not to sound defensive. "Not obvious," he said with a faint smile, closing his book. "Just a hunch. I'm Eli." She hesitated before offering her name, feeling like it was a transaction of trust. Ava. The train began to move, though she hadn't noticed it start. The station blurred, then vanished, replaced by a dense forest cloaked in mist. The ride was impossibly smooth, as though the train hovered above the tracks. "So why are you here?" Eli asked, leaning forward slightly. "Why is anyone anywhere?" Ava countered, her tone half joking. Eli laughed. "Fair. But most people don't end up here without a reason." Ava shrugged, unwilling to admit she didn't know why she'd bought the ticket. She was supposed to be back at her tiny apartment, preparing for a presentation she wasn't passionate about. Instead, she'd wandered into the station and found herself inexplicably drawn to this train. They spent the next hour talking, about books, dreams, and the peculiarities of life. Eli's insights were like sunlight cutting through clouds, and Ava found herself sharing more than she usually would. There was an ease to their conversation, like they'd met in some forgotten lifetime. "Do you believe in destiny?" Eli asked suddenly, his gaze intent. "I don't know," Ava said, caught off guard. "Do you?" Eli hesitated. "I used to think destiny was a path you couldn't avoid, but now I think it's more like a choice. You decide what to make of it." The train slowed unexpectedly, though they were nowhere near a station. Outside, the forest had turned surreal. Trees with leaves of silver and gold stretched toward a sky shimmering in hues of violet and orange. Ava pressed her face to the window, mesmerized. "What is this place?" she whispered. "It's where the Eterna decides," Eli said quietly. "Decides what?" Eli's expression shifted, his easy smile replaced by something solemn. "Where you're meant to go." Before she could ask what he meant, the train lurched to a stop. The door to their car opened, revealing a narrow path winding into the forest. "This is your stop," Eli said, standing. "But I didn't ask to get off," Ava protested. "Not all choices are conscious," he replied, his voice gentle. Ava glanced at the path, then back at Eli. Something in his eyes told her this was more than just a journey. It was a test, a leap of faith. "Will I see you again?" she asked, her chest tightening. Eli smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe, if that's what you choose." As she stepped off the train, the air around her shimmered, and the forest seemed to pulse with life. The Eterna pulled away silently, leaving Ava alone on the path. She felt both exhilarated and terrified. Then she realized something chilling. She hadn't told Eli her name. And yet, he had known it. Chapter 2. The Forest That Listens. Ava stood frozen, watching the train fade into the distance, its faint whistle swallowed by the misty silence. The air was heavy, thick with a scent she couldn't place, earthy, sweet, and oddly metallic. The forest around her seemed alive, the golden and silver leaves shifting without wind, as though whispering secrets to one another. Her pulse quickened. She had no idea where she was or why she'd been brought here. The narrow path ahead wound deeper into the woods, its stones glinting faintly in the ethereal light. Ava gripped the strap of her bag tightly and began to walk. The first few steps were tentative, but as she moved, the path seemed to respond, smoothing itself under her feet. Each step felt like an invitation, though she couldn't shake the sense that she was being watched. "Eli?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer, only the soft rustle of the shimmering leaves. The path widened suddenly, leading her to a small clearing bathed in an otherworldly glow. At the center stood a massive tree with bark like polished obsidian, its branches adorned with golden fruits that pulsed faintly, as though alive. Beneath the tree was a stone bench, and on it sat an elderly woman wrapped in a cloak of woven starlight. "Welcome, Ava," the woman said, her voice like the hum of distant thunder. Ava's heart leapt. "How do you know my name?" The woman smiled, her eyes glinting like the stars on her cloak. "This forest knows you. It has known you for longer than you can imagine." "That doesn't make any sense," Ava said, taking a step back. "Few things do at first," the woman replied, standing slowly. She was impossibly tall, her presence both comforting and imposing. "You've been searching, haven't you? For purpose, for meaning." Ava opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. How many sleepless nights had she spent wondering if she was on the right path? If there was more to life than what she'd built for herself? "What is this place?" Ava asked. "It is a crossroads," the woman said. "A place where decisions are made, not by logic, but by the soul. The train brought you here because it knows you are ready." "Ready for what?" The woman gestured to the golden fruits hanging from the tree. "Each fruit holds a memory, a truth, or a possibility. If you choose one, you will see your path more clearly. But be warned, what you learn may not be what you expect." Ava hesitated. "What happens if I don't choose?" The woman's gaze darkened slightly. "Then you remain as you are, adrift, uncertain. The train will not return for you, Ava. This is your moment." Ava stared at the tree, the golden fruits glowing softly in the dim light. She felt a pull, an urge to reach out, though fear clawed at her mind. "What if I choose wrong?" she whispered. "There is no wrong choice," the woman said gently. "Only the choice that reveals who you are." Swallowing hard, Ava stepped forward. Her hand trembled as she reached for a fruit, its surface warm and pulsing under her fingertips. The moment she plucked it, a rush of light enveloped her, blinding and all-consuming. When the light faded, Ava was no longer in the forest. She stood on a cobblestone street under a twilight sky, the air cool and brimming with the scent of lavender. She recognized the place immediately. Prague. But something was off. The city felt quieter, emptier. The people who walked past her didn't seem to notice her, their faces oddly blurred like smudged paintings. "Ava." She turned sharply. Eli stood a few feet away, his leather-bound book tucked under one arm. "Eli," she gasped. "What is going on? Why am I here?" He smiled faintly. "You made your choice." "What does that mean?" "What did I choose?" Eli stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You chose truth. But truth is rarely simple." Ava's chest tightened. "Stop speaking in riddles. Tell me what's happening," opening his book. Inside were pages filled with sketches and words that shimmered like the fruits on the tree. He turned the book toward her, and Ava's breath caught. The pages showed her life, moments she recognized and others she didn't. And then she saw it. A scene of herself, standing in the forest, plucking the fruit. "This isn't real," she whispered, shaking her head. "It's as real as you make it," Eli said. "The train, the forest, me, it's all a reflection of your choices. The question is, Ava, what will you do now?" Before she could respond, the world began to dissolve, the cobblestones crumbling beneath her feet. She reached out for Eli, but he was already fading. The last thing she heard was his voice, soft and distant. "Find your path, Ava, before it finds you." Ava jolted awake, her hands clutching the armrests of her seat. She was back on the train, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels steady beneath her. Outside the window, the familiar landscape of Berlin blurred past. Had it all been a dream? Her fingers brushed against something in her lap, a golden fruit, its surface warm and glowing faintly. The Eterna Express wasn't done with her yet. Chapter 3. The Key in the Fruit. Ava stared at the golden fruit in her lap, its faint glow casting tiny shadows on her trembling hands. The train car was eerily silent, the hum of the wheels muted, as though the world had paused. She glanced around, hoping to see Eli or the elderly woman cloaked in starlight, but she was alone. Her heart raced. Was it real? The forest? Eli? That tree? Instinctively, she ran her fingers over the fruit's surface. It was smooth but warm, almost alive, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. There was no stem, no visible seam, just an orb of impossibility sitting in her lap. Her curiosity overpowered her fear. Slowly, she brought the fruit closer to her face, examining its surface. Embedded in the golden glow were faint lines, almost like veins. She pressed gently, and the fruit emitted a soft chime as though responding to her touch, and then it cracked open. Ava gasped, expecting juice to spill or light to burst forth. Instead, the fruit split cleanly, revealing a hollow interior. Inside was a small, intricate key, made of the same shimmering gold as the fruit. It was delicate yet solid, its teeth carved into a pattern that seemed more like art than utility. "What is this?" Ava whispered to herself. As if in answer, the train jolted to a stop. She hadn't noticed how fast it was moving, but now everything felt still. The lights flickered briefly, and then the door to her compartment slid open with a quiet hiss. Beyond it was not a train corridor, but a narrow hallway made of polished wood, its walls lined with ornate mirrors that reflected distorted versions of her. Ava hesitated, clutching the key tightly. This isn't normal. None of this is normal. But something deep inside her urged her forward. She stepped into the hallway, the golden key warm in her palm. The door behind her slid shut, and the train's interior vanished. She was fully inside this strange new space now, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The mirrors whispered as she passed, their voices soft and fragmented. Why does she linger? She holds the key, yet hesitates. Does she even know what it unlocks? Stop, Ava snapped, her voice trembling. The whispers fell silent, but the weight of their words lingered. The hallway ended abruptly, opening into a circular chamber bathed in soft bat-golden light. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, its surface carved with swirling patterns that seemed to shift as she approached. A lock was embedded at the center, its shape a perfect match for the key in her hand. Ava's throat tightened. This felt like a choice, just as the woman in the forest had said, a choice she wasn't sure she was ready to make. "What happens if I do this?" she called out, her voice echoing in the chamber. No one answered. Taking a deep breath, Ava stepped closer. She hesitated for only a moment before sliding the key into the lock. It fit perfectly, the metal clicking into place. As she turned the key, the room began to change. The walls rippled, the light intensifying until it was blinding. Ava shielded her eyes, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. When the light subsided, Ava found herself standing in a bustling square. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of fresh bread and flowers. Around her, people moved with purpose, their faces sharp and vivid. It was Prague again, but this time it felt real, alive in a way the blurred version had not. She glanced down and realized she was still holding the key, though it no longer shimmered. It looked like an ordinary brass key now, dull and unremarkable. Ava. She turned quickly, her heart leaping. Eli stood a few feet away, his expression calm but serious. "What is this?" Ava demanded. "Why am I here? Why are you here?" "This," Eli said, gesturing to the vibrant square, "is your second chance." Second chance? You've been drifting, Ava, living a life that wasn't truly yours. The train brought you to the forest brought you the key, and now? He gestured again, his voice softening. Now it's up to you. To do what? To decide. The weight of his words sank into her. For so long, she'd felt trapped by her job, by her own indecision, by a life that felt too small for her. But standing here, holding the key that had unlocked this moment, she realized something. She could choose. "What happens if I don't want to go back?" she asked. Eli smiled faintly. "Then you won't." For the first time, Ava didn't feel fear or doubt. She felt clarity. She looked at Eli, then at the vibrant city around her. "I want to stay." Eli's smile deepened, his hazel eyes glinting. Good choice. And as the square came to life around her, music playing, people laughing, Ava felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. The train, the forest, the key, they had all been a journey. Not to somewhere else, but to herself. And now, finally, she was home. Chapter 4. The Man Who Didn't Belong. Days passed, or perhaps weeks. It was hard for Ava to tell. Her new life in Prague was surreal yet grounding. She found herself immersed in the rhythm of the city, working at a small bookstore nestled in a cobblestone alleyway and spending her evenings exploring art galleries or writing by the river. But one question lingered like a shadow. Who was Eli, and why had he brought her here? The key remained with her, tucked safely into her pocket. Its ordinary brass appearance did nothing to diminish the sense that it held a power she didn't fully understand. One evening, as the golden hour painted the city in hues of amber, Ava sat on a bench overlooking the Vltava River. She had taken to carrying a sketchbook lately, capturing fragments of the world around her. As her pencil moved across the page, she felt a presence nearby. "You're getting better at that," a familiar voice said. Ava's head snapped up, her heart skipping. Eli stood a few feet away, his leather-bound book under one arm and that same unreadable smile on his face. "You," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of relief and frustration. "You disappeared. Again." "I didn't disappear," Eli replied, taking a seat beside her. "I just let you find your footing." Ava studied him, noting the way his hazel eyes reflected the sunlight. He seemed so ordinary, yet there was something about him that defied logic. "Who are you, really?" Eli leaned back, his gaze drifting to the river. "I'm a guide, I suppose. Someone who helps people find their way when they're lost." "And what does that mean? Are you even real?" He chuckled softly. "I'm as real as you need me to be." "That's not an answer." Eli turned to her, his expression softening. "The train, the forest, the key, they're all part of something bigger. You weren't happy where you were, Ava. You felt trapped, and you needed a way out. The Eterna brought you here because you were ready to make a change. I'm just part of that process." "Why me?" "You're not the only one," Eli said. "The Eterna has been helping people for centuries, but it only appears to those who are truly at a crossroads." Ava frowned, her fingers brushing against the key in her pocket. "So what now? I stay here forever? What if I want answers?" Eli hesitated, his usual calm demeanor faltering for the first time. "There's a risk in searching for answers, Ava. The more you dig, the more you might uncover things you're not ready for." "Try me," Eli sighed, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small folded piece of paper and handed it to her. "What is this?" Ava asked. "It's a clue," Eli said. "But be careful. Once you open it, there's no going back." Ava stared at the paper, her heart pounding. She unfolded it slowly, revealing a single line written in elegant script. "The door to truth is locked by the past." Before she could ask what it meant, Eli stood, tucking his book under his arm. "Wait," Ava called out, standing as well. "What does this mean? Where do I find the door?" "You already have everything you need," Eli said, his voice soft. "Trust yourself, Ava." And just like that, he was gone. One moment he was there, and the next he wasn't. That night, Ava couldn't sleep. The words on the paper burned in her mind. "The door to truth is locked by the past." She pulled the key from her pocket, its weight heavier than it had been before. Her past. What did it mean? Was it something she'd forgotten, or something she had tried to forget? Unable to shake the feeling that she was on the brink of something monumental, Ava decided to act. She grabbed her coat and left her apartment, the city's quiet streets glowing under the moonlight. The key seemed to guide her, its warmth growing stronger as she walked. It led her through twisting alleys and over ancient bridges until she found herself standing in front of an old, crumbling building she didn't recognize. The door was massive, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer faintly in the moonlight. At its center was a keyhole, an exact match for the one in her hand. Ava hesitated, her pulse pounding in her ears. Was this the truth she wanted? Taking a deep breath, she slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing darkness so deep it seemed to pull her in. As she stepped inside, the air grew cold and whispers filled the void. And then she saw it. A room filled with mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of herself. The child she had been, the woman she could have become, the shadow of someone she didn't recognize. At the center of the room was a single mirror that didn't reflect anything at all. Instead, it showed a doorway leading to somewhere else entirely. Ava stepped closer, her heart racing. Behind her, the whispers grew louder, one voice standing out above the rest. "Are you ready to face the truth, Ava?" She clenched her fists, her voice steady as she answered, "Yes." And with that, she stepped through the mirror. Chapter 5. The Reflection That Lies. The sensation of stepping through the mirror was like being submerged in ice-cold water. Ava gasped as the world blurred and twisted around her, shadows and light folding together until she emerged into a place that felt impossibly vast and still. The ground beneath her feet was smooth, polished like black glass, and the sky above was an endless void streaked with faint silver threads. There was no wind, no sound, just an oppressive silence that pressed on her chest. In the distance, she saw a figure standing alone. As Ava approached, the figure became clearer, and her steps faltered. It wasn't just anyone standing there. It was her. The reflection of Ava was taller, more confident, and clad in a sleek, dark outfit that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto Ava's with an intensity that made her stomach churn. "Finally," the reflection said, her voice cold and laced with disdain. "Took you long enough to get here." Ava stared, her heart pounding. "What is this? Who are you?" The reflection tilted her head, smirking. "I'm you, or at least the part of you you've been trying to bury for years. The ambitious one, the ruthless one, the one who doesn't waste time doubting every step." "That's not true," Ava shot back, though her voice wavered. "I'm not like that." The reflection laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Aren't you? You've spent your life pretending to be content, following rules, sticking to safe paths, but deep down, you know you want more. You've always wanted more." Ava clenched her fists. "Even if I have, it doesn't mean I have to lose myself to get it." The reflection's smirk faded, replaced by a steely glare. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about what you want. It's about who you are. And until you accept that, you'll keep running in circles, never truly satisfied." The ground beneath them began to ripple, faint images appearing in the glassy surface. Ava saw fragments of her past, moments she had long forgotten or tried to ignore. She saw herself as a child, standing alone in a schoolyard, watching other kids laugh and play. She saw her teenage self, clutching a rejection letter from a university she'd dreamed of attending. She saw herself in her tiny apartment, staring blankly at her computer screen, feeling the weight of a life that felt too small. "Stop it," Ava whispered, her voice cracking. The reflection stepped closer, her expression softening slightly. "You don't have to keep running from it, Ava. Every failure, every fear, it's all part of you. But until you stop hiding from the pieces you don't like, you'll never be whole." Ava felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know how to do that." The reflection reached out, placing a hand on Ava's shoulder. Her touch was surprisingly warm. "You've already started. The train, the forest, the key, they were all ways to guide you here. To this moment. Now it's time to make a choice." "What choice?" Ava asked, her voice barely a whisper. The reflection gestured behind her. Ava turned to see two doorways that hadn't been there before. One glowed softly with a golden light, warm and inviting. The other was shrouded in shadow, its edges jagged and foreboding. "The golden door leads back to the life you've built here in Prague," the reflection said. "Safe, comfortable, but limited. The shadowed door, well, that's the unknown. It's risk and possibility, fear and freedom. It's everything you've ever wanted but didn't think you deserved." Ava's chest tightened. "What's behind it?" The reflection smiled faintly. "I don't know. That's for you to discover, but if you walk through, there's no turning back." Ava looked at the doors, her mind racing. She thought of the life she'd built in Prague, the bookstore, the river, the quiet peace she had found. But she also thought of Eli's words, the forest, the train that appeared only to those ready for something more. She turned back to her reflection, searching her face for answers. "What would you do?" The reflection's smile turned wistful. "I'm not here to decide for you, Ava. But if you're asking me, I think it's time you stopped playing small." Ava took a deep breath, her hands trembling. She stepped forward, her feet carrying her toward the shadowed door. As she reached for the handle, her reflection spoke one last time. "Whatever happens, remember, you're stronger than you think." Ava glanced back, but the reflection was already fading, dissolving into the void. When Ava stepped through the shadowed door, the world around her dissolved again, and she felt herself falling. The air roared in her ears, her heart pounding wildly. And then, suddenly she was standing in a sunlit field, the sky impossibly blue above her. A small house stood in the distance, smoke curling from its chimney. A voice called out, faint but familiar, "Ava?" She turned, her breath catching. Standing there, alive and real, was someone she hadn't seen in years. Someone she thought she'd lost forever. Her mother. Chapter 6. The Door to Home. Ava froze, her legs rooted to the soft grass beneath her. Her mother stood a few feet away, just as Ava remembered her. A kind face, warm eyes, and a presence that felt like safety itself. But this wasn't possible. "You're not real," Ava whispered, her voice trembling. Her mother tilted her head, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "Aren't I?" The wind brushed through the field, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers. Ava felt the weight of the key in her pocket, a reminder of how far she had come. "Where am I?" Ava asked, her voice steadier now. Her mother gestured to the field around them. "You're at the end of the path you chose, Ava. But this isn't about where you are. It's about what you're ready to face." The words struck deep, unlocking something Ava had tried to bury. Memories flooded back, her mother's laughter echoing through their small house, the quiet strength she had always shown, and the day everything changed, the car accident that had taken her away. Tears welled up in Ava's eyes. "You're gone. You've been gone for so long." Her mother stepped closer, her presence as tangible as the sunlight on Ava's skin. "I've never been gone, sweetheart. I've always been with you, in every choice you made, every step you took. But you've been carrying the weight of my loss for too long." Ava's chest tightened. "I didn't know how to let go. I felt like if I moved on, I'd lose you completely." Her mother reached out, taking Ava's hands in her own. Her touch was warm, grounding, and real. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means making room for the life you deserve. You've carried guilt and grief, thinking you had to be someone else to honor me. But Ava, all I ever wanted was for you to be happy. Ava's tears fell freely now, her heart aching and mending all at once. "I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Her mother smiled, squeezing her hands. "You've already shown your strength, Ava. You took the risk. You walked through the door. And now it's time to trust yourself." The field around them shimmered, the sunlight growing brighter. Ava felt the ground beneath her shift, the warmth of her mother's hands anchoring her. "I don't want to leave you again," Ava said, her voice breaking. "You're not leaving me," her mother said softly. "You're carrying me with you in everything you do. And when you need me, you'll find me here." Her mother gestured to Ava's heart, and for the first time, Ava understood. The light grew blinding, and when it receded, Ava found herself standing back in the bustling square in Prague. The city hummed with life, its streets and sounds vibrant and familiar. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the key, but it was no longer brass. It had transformed into a small pendant, etched with the outline of a tree. Ava slipped it around her neck, the weight a comforting reminder of what she had gained. As she turned, she saw Eli standing by the fountain, watching her with that familiar, knowing smile. "You made it," he said simply. "I did," Ava replied, her voice steady. Eli tilted his head, studying her. "And how do you feel?" Ava glanced around, taking in the beauty of the world she had reclaimed. For the first time in years, her heart felt light, like I'm finally free. Eli nodded, his smile deepening. "Good, that's all the Eterna ever wanted for you." Ava stepped closer, her curiosity still burning. "What happens now? Does this train, the key, everything, does it just disappear?" Eli's eyes twinkled. "The Eterna is always there, waiting for those who need it, but your journey is yours now, Ava. Live it fully." She wanted to ask more, but Eli turned, his form shimmering like a mirage. He raised a hand in farewell before fading into the crowd. Ava stood there for a moment, her heart swelling with gratitude and possibility. She didn't need all the answers anymore. She had found what she truly needed, herself. As the sun set over the city, Ava walked toward her future with the kind of certainty she had never known. And this time, she wasn't afraid.